this committee that's been set up by the Ministry of Defense under the Defense Secretary takes place in the context of this quote-unquote dirty linen being in full public view. So everyone sort of knows what's going on. And this is no longer some, esoteric, secretive kind of story. It's something that has hit the front pages of national newspapers and is the big headline from the world of defense this year. There is no universe, I would say, in which HAL or anybody, talking about HAL can say that, give these guys a break. They've never done this at scale, or this is our own aircraft, therefore it brings its own complexities. I reject that completely. Even 10 years from now, nobody is going to cut HAL any slack as far as that is concerned, because, like I said, HAL has enjoyed the fruits of unbridled monopoly. For HAL, this means, a kind of unthinkable prospect as far as the Tejas program is concerned. The Tejas has been a captive manufacturing project for Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and it has never in its mind, war-gamed a situation where any part of that is going to go to somebody else completely. The way HAL is configured is, it is the mothership, it is the lead integrator, it is the mother manufacturer of this aircraft, and all these satellite companies standing around will build parts and send them in, and we will integrate them and supply them to the Air Force. Nobody else will do that. Now you've got the possibility of a private sector becoming a kind of mini HAL to build combat aircraft, which has never happened in the past. It's unprecedented that this is even being thought about. The harsh reality is that the Air Force needs numbers quickly. And those numbers are going to hopefully be made up by the Tejas. That committee is going to recommend the Tejas ASAP program. And then you've got the MRFA, which will have to provide that short-term boost of strength. I don't want to use the word stopgap anymore because it's become a joke. Nothing should be seen as a stopgap, because fighter aircraft are not party toys that you use for a while and throw away. They're going to be with you for 30, 40, maybe even 50 years.
Hello and welcome. This is the 58th episode of Inner Defense, and this is going to be the last episode of season 2 of Inner Defense, Shiv. And in the proud traditions of all things Indian defense procurement, we are ending this season on not a round number, ordering 36 jets, ordering 97 Tejases, ordering 31 Predator drones, and not a round number. And similarly, I think in that proud tradition, even in our defense season 2 will end not on 60, not on 55, not on 58 episodes.
Yeah.
So
our listeners and viewers have come to expect that.
Yeah. So we'll kind of, first of all, Shiv, before we begin this episode, I actually want to thank you. And I think a lot of our listeners and viewers will agree, because over the course of the 58 episodes, 57 so far, at 58 will be this one. Not just them, I think I've also learned loads and loads from you because of your vast experience and sort of your insight that you have, that I think at times you're not able to sort of write about or really talk about in your daily in your day job, in your daily reporting, because of various factors. I think this kind of gave you that space to sort of look back, think back, and give us those hard-hitting insights that we are really thankful for. So thanks a lot for that, Shiv.
And I, in these discussions, Dave, I have to say that I've learned a lot as well, because researching for a podcast is a whole different ball game from TV or writing, because we've got so many listeners who hang on to every word we say. So it's very, very important, especially to get it right. So I think this podcast for me has also been a big learning experience. There have been times when I've said something that may not have been correct, and there's an instant correction, and so it's been very enjoyable for me as well.
Right. Right. So as we end this season, we are gonna, like I discussed in the previous episode, we are gonna focus on the big question. I think that's been the theme of season 2 of Inner Defense, is what to do and how do you solve the Indian Air Force's problems of not having enough fighter jets, enough fighter jet squadrons. I think apart from whether or not the Indian Navy should get a third aircraft carrier, I think this is the big question that right now is I think the big question that the government, the Defense Ministry, that the Air Force, all the three militaries, the Chief of Defense Staff Office are grappling with, because there are many options, not many options, but there are many different pathways. I think in a previous episode you talked about that can be taken, and it's not really clear which one you want to go down the road. I think the two big questions, like we've talked about on this season, the Tejas program, for all its faults, for all its delays, has kind of come to that tipping point where it's just there, but it's still not there yet, and you still don't quite know what you need to do, that next step to ensure that those
Yeah.
jets just start rolling in, that gap is fulfilled. And the other big question of what is going to be your either the next purchase or the next development when it comes to the futuristic fifth generation aircraft. Do you go for an all out purchase from, let's say, the US or Europe or maybe Russia, but Russia you discovered in the previous episode, or you focus on building it in your own country? So these are the two big questions, and I think, like we were discussing before this recording, these are the thing. This is sort of a do or die moment when
Yeah,
it comes to
absolutely.
addressing this
Yeah.
question. So we'll focus on that on this last episode. Let's take Tejas at first. Like I said, it's come to the tipping point.
Hmm.
It's there. It's been more or less tested, the Tejas Mk1A especially, but deliveries are still not coming in because of certain issues. Uh, there's a new committee to look into that, which is a bit weird because I think just 4 or 5, maybe 6 episodes ago, we discussed about one another committee that had been set up by the government of India to look into the Air Force's overall issue of not having enough fighter jets. So this is sort of, I'm guessing, like a tangent from there,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
okay, we'll discuss that later, but first let's figure out how to get the Tejas deliveries in order. So before we delve into about HAL and Tejas and what could be the future, yeah, tell us about what's this company gonna do now.
My first reaction, Dave, was exactly like yours when I heard about this committee, which was to roll my eyes because how many committees have we actually seen
Yeah.
figure out things that should have been figured out a long time back, and the compounding problems, delays, overruns, whatever it is, has led to a kind of instinctive systemic response, which seems to believe that just setting up committees and kicking decisions down the road seems to be the order of the day. The that's the bad news. The good news is, as some bureaucrats have called to tell me, is that committees, when they work, can actually be very, very effective. Now, this particular committee is headed by the defense secretary.
Mm.
The atmosphere under which this committee has been set up is a particularly hostile one,
Yep.
because you've got the Air Force chief, as we said, as we detailed in our previous episode. He scolded HAL, rebuked them publicly, pulled them up, in front of the entire world, hit the front pages for that episode that went viral. So this committee that's been set up by the Ministry of Defense under the Defense Secretary takes place in the context of this quote unquote dirty linen being in full public view. So everyone sort of knows what's going on, and this is no longer some esoteric, secretive kind of story. It's something that has hit the front pages of national newspapers and is the big headline from the world of defense this year. Uh, the good news is that this committee, headed by the defense secretary, has to submit its recommendations and an action plan in early March, which means it's not it's not an endless committee which has
Yeah.
been given 6 months or a year to come up with a plan, and even then there is no real promise that its recommendations will be implemented. I've been given to believe that this is an empowered committee, which means its recommendations, HAL and the other organizations involved have to commit to implementing those recommendations, since they come from the top bureaucrat of the Ministry of Defense. The terms of reference of this committee are they're not a surprise. They are exactly the problems that the air chief has listed, that we've been talking about over the last quite a few episodes as well, which is that how do you get the Tejas in faster? It's as simple as that, or as I called it on TV, the Tejas ASAP committee. Okay, and there's no better way to describe it. This committee is basically going to formulate a set of recommendations by which HAL can begin delivering its Tejas Mk1A fighters, 83 of them, which were ordered few years ago, faster, and to achieve a production and delivery rate of anywhere between 24 and 30 aircraft per year. 24 aircraft is what HAL says its peak capacity will be. It could reach 30 if the private sector is harnessed in a big way. Now, we'll get into the pros and cons of private sector in a moment, but overall, the broad picture is that this committee under the Defense Secretary will likely recommend an action plan which directly involves the private sector in one way. Now, for those who may not be aware, the private sector is already involved in a very big way with the Tejas. There are big and small companies that make significant portions of the Tejas already. Front assembly, mid assembly, back assembly, fuselage parts of all kinds. Whether it is Tata's, whether it is L&T, whether it is companies like VEM Technologies, whether it's companies like Dynamatics. All of these companies, not now but for years, have been producing and delivering parts of the Tejas, which HAL then integrates into the entire aircraft. What HAL has been looking to do now, in order to get that production rate up. Right now, the production rate is nothing to boast about. Getting the production rate to 24 aircraft a year is going to be a challenge between production lines in Bengaluru as well as Nashik. Now there is talk of HAL wanting to receive fully assembled fuselages from the private sector, which will then allow it to ramp up its production rate and delivery to the Air Force by an even larger number. HAL chairman Dr. D.K. Sunil has been quoted in an interview of saying that if they are able to get that private sector participation right, if they are able to utilize private sector capacity in companies like L&T and Tata, etc., he believes that he can achieve a production and delivery rate of 30 aircraft a year. Now, many in the Air Force right now will be scoffing and rolling their eyes and saying, "Arey, 24 tak to aa jao pehle." Instead of aiming for higher than that, at least achieve what you've said you will achieve before talking of higher numbers. Many in the Air Force justifiably, see this as, attempting to do more than you've promised, misplaced optimism and things like that. And HAL, understandably, is in a difficult position because all eyes are on them.
Yes.
The system's glare is on them. The public glare is on them. And therefore, for them, this is a trial by fire. It's a litmus test. In many ways, it's a do or die kind of situation as far as HAL is concerned, because the relationship with the Air Force, it's not a happy place right now, like we discussed in the last episode. So this committee is going to sort of cut through all the cut through the atmosphere of emotions that has sort of taken over this story over the last 1 month, and provide a serious, actionable roadmap as to how HAL can begin delivering the Tejas fighters to the satisfaction of the Air Force.
Right. Yeah, I think that's perfect, the way you describe it and the way you say it's a sort of a do or die moment for HAL. The private sector bit is going to be a focus on this episode. But before we get to that, I wanted to actually talk to you also about, the two of us are talking about this in the moment. We are, sort of discussing it, the developments as and when they happen. So obviously emotions are involved. Obviously our takes are also in the moment, not with the benefit of hindsight. I was wondering whether you would agree with me that perhaps a decade down the line, maybe a few years down the line, we would look back then with the benefit of hindsight and say that these were all just teething issues, because this is the first time you as a country are developing a fighter jet, which, in a previous episode you've described as a highly complex project. This is the first time you're developing a fighter jet of this magnitude at this scale. Right now, we know that, like you previously said, HAL has, for long been a cookie cutter, like you like to say it, where basically it gets the designs and gets the sort of the blueprint of what an aircraft should look like, and it sort of assembles them over here. How different is that compared to what HAL is trying to do now when it comes to developing your own fighter jet, getting those components from all over the country and assembling it at your own, sort of factory? Of course, the engine is coming from the US. That's a separate matter. So yeah, my question to you, and what I wonder, a few years down the line, will we look back and kind of give HAL the benefit of doubt that, hey, what you achieved at the end even though there were delays, was a fantastic thing.
No, this is a very good question, Dev, and I'm glad you asked it. I don't think HAL will have the luxury of hiding behind the argument that building a fighter aircraft is a very complex, proposition, and that building your own fighter aircraft at this scale, is very different from what you've done before. The cookie cutter argument is absolutely right, because HAL has so far been building somebody else's fighter aircraft. They've been building aircraft from wherever, from Russia or Russia or the United Kingdom or wherever. But if you sort of zoom in, even the Tejas is not an HAL aircraft. The Tejas was developed by the Aeronautical Development Agency. HAL is the lead integration, the manufacturer of the aircraft. It is, of course, involved in some ways in the development, especially in the Tejas Mk1A. The Tejas is not an HAL fighter like the Marut was, right? I don't want to say that it's the same thing. It's not. HAL is not, certainly not cookie cutting the Tejas, but it is. It's just another fighter aircraft that it is manufacturing in very similar fashion, with the same amounts of complexities and things like that. Of course, with the added benefits that everything is here in India. It doesn't have to look abroad for anything. All of the people who develop the fighters are right here, within a few hundred meters or a few hundred kilometers away. Having said that, HAL is not a newborn baby when it comes to even the manufacture of the Tejas. The Tejas Mark 1, 36 have been delivered so far. The 4 remaining trainers will be delivered very soon. 36 aircraft, first of all, is not a small number. And those 36 aircraft are all production series aircraft, which means those are not limited series production. Those are not prototypes. Those are full rate production aircraft that have been delivered to the Indian Air Force in batches, which means that HAL knows how to build these fighters. There is no doubt that HAL has the know-how, the capacity, the engineering, the engineering competence, and all the other skill sets required to build these fighters. So there is no universe, I would say, in which HAL or anybody talking about HAL can say that, give these guys a break. They've never done this at scale, or this is our own aircraft, therefore it brings its own complexities. I reject that completely. Even 10 years from now, nobody is going to cut HAL any slack as far as that is concerned, because like I said, HAL has enjoyed the fruits of unbridled monopoly in this country. And so by now, for anyone to defend HAL by saying that, come on, yeah, go easy on them. They've never done it at this scale is ludicrous. They don't deserve that kind of margin at all. But the truth is, HAL is fighting back. A wake up call is a wake up call as far as HAL is concerned, and I strongly believe that this do or die situation, in many ways, is, and I'll qualify why I call it a do or die situation. One, because this committee that we're talking about is involving the private sector, is about involving the private sector in a bigger way. Now, in a previous episode, we've talked extensively about how for HAL, a relationship with the private sector has always been there. It has always outsourced vast amounts of work to the private sector. But at no point has that dynamic been HAL competing with that private sector. Okay, and with the C295, a production facility in Vadodara, Gujarat, that dynamic has completely changed, where HAL now views the private sector not as a place where it can delegate work to and get assemblies and help its own order book grow, but as a sector where it could lose business to, literally lose business to. There are skeptics who say, what are you talking about? After a couple of episodes ago, people were saying, you think the private sector is a kind of miraculous cure to all production issues. Of course it's not, and I'll get into a little bit more detail into that, because there is some substance to that. But for HAL to now view this committee, they will be looking at this committee and thinking, this committee is going to basically accelerate and probably elevate the amount of work that the private sector is going to take on, because the private sector has an enormous amount of potential capacity that can be used to build parts of the Tejas in order to take some of the burden of HAL. Now, none of this is as easy as it sounds, because building capacity takes months and years. It's not like, oh, L&T is going to build this, chalo, from tomorrow start delivering this stuff. It takes a long time to do the tooling, fix up factories, facilities for something as complicated as a fighter aircraft. But according to the reports, like you said, there's talk of possibly a fresh production line being completely under the private sector. Again, easier said than done. But for HAL, this means a kind of unthinkable prospect as far as the Tejas program is concerned. The Tejas has been a captive manufacturing project for Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and it has never in its mind war gamed a situation where any part of that is going to go to somebody else completely. The way HAL is configured is, it is the mothership, it is the lead integrator, it is the mother manufacturer of this aircraft, and all these satellite companies standing around will build parts and send them in, and we will integrate them and supply them to the Air Force. Nobody else will do that. Now you've got the possibility of a private sector becoming a kind of mini HAL to build combat aircraft, which has never happened in the past. It's unprecedented that this is even being thought about. Now, obviously, such a facility, if it even happens, cannot come up overnight. It will come up many years later. It may be for the Tejas Mk1A. It may be for the second order of Tejas, the 97 that are going to be also ordered of the Tejas Mk1A. All of these permutations and combinations are possible, because we have to admit that we still don't know what the committee is actually going to recommend until those recommendations land. So for HAL, there is a cultural shift happening. There is it has to completely alter the way it is thinking, and that's not easy for a PSU. Very, very difficult for a large Sarkari company to make peace with the new normal and the new reality. There are those who will say that, these are market forces, and, HAL is a professionally run company and they would have expected this kind of thing to happen. That's true. And while that is true, there is a sense of complacency in PSUs which feel that, look, ultimately we are a Sarkari government organization. Ultimately we come under the MOD, and therefore our interests will be protected. The problem is the definition of those interests. The interests have to be with the customer, not with the company. The interests have to be whether the Tejas is delivered on time to the Air Force, not whether HAL is getting those orders or not, or whether not whether HAL is manufacturing all those aircraft or not, or whether quality control is complete or not. So I think that's the reason why for HAL looking at this committee is not going to be an easy prospect. But from the from at least the words that we've heard from the chairman, from people I've spoken to in HAL, they're kind of biting their teeth and preparing themselves for life after this committee now, because it's going to recommend things that will completely change things for HAL.
Yeah, I quite get that. Because, to take your thought forward, if this committee was about protecting HAL's interest, the committee would then be looking inside HAL to see yahan kya change kar sakte so that Tejas comes on time, and not like looking only solely the topic of ki kya kar sakte hai generally to get Tejas on time, because that is the priority, and the priority is not to ensure HAL delivers, it's to ensure Tejas aata hai. If it comes from L&T, well and good. The Tejas project, like you keep telling us that, you've seen it throughout your career. Is it the last instance of us seeing a project totally under government control, a fighter project or any big defense equipment manufacturing project, and the private sector, regardless of what the committee recommends for Tejas per se, because that could just be like, like we discussed, it's only for this particular instance, only for Tejas, because we need those aircraft very badly. The recommendations will be specific to that. But perhaps the other committee, the overall committee that's sort of looking at the larger picture, or maybe some other committee in the future, this is the last instance where we see only government labs, only government manufacturers, only government PSUs basically involved in the development and manufacturing cycle of any top defense equipment. And from here on now, you will see the private sector getting involved in a big way. And if that is going to happen, which I suspect it will, what do you also see will be the challenges that this government and future governments will be mindful and worried about? For example, let's just say, and this is going to be like, this is a very the most expected one, is that then the questions and then it becoming a political controversy because of allegations of corruption, like, whether they're there or not. It becomes very easy when it comes to the private sector. The question of the private sector obviously will be focusing more on making profits than ensuring, sort of deliveries, not deliveries per se, but then the focus on profits will obviously be more, but that also has advantages as well, right? So one, yeah, do you think this, like I said, the process of the way we saw Tejas being developed, that's it, you will not see that happening in the future in that particular manner? And like I said, the advantages and disadvantages of having the private sector involved big
So
time.
my short answer to that, Dave, is that I don't see the private sector becoming a developer and a lead integrator
Okay.
of manned fighter aircraft anywhere on the horizon. Certainly not in our lifetime,
Hmm.
and probably never. And I'll qualify that. The reason is uh, the way India does things, the mindset of having sarkari control over military hardware is going to be a very, very difficult thing to shake.
Hmm.
Okay, uh, you have a huge number of private sector companies in India right now doing a vast amount of outsourcing work for foreign manufacturers,
Yes.
building aerostructures, building entire fuselages. The Tatas are about to build a full Airbus helicopter in Telangana as well. All of these things are happening here in India, but I very much doubt that taking a combat aircraft program and giving it to the private sector as a developer is ever going to happen. What we are likely to see happen is what we just discussed, which is manufacturing work, building work, fabrication work. That kind of thing could easily happen, and that could also happen very quickly. The other reason why I don't believe that you will see the private sector involved in a developmental sort of role for combat aircraft is because the nature of warfare is also changing.
Yep.
And we've done an episode on this as well. How long into the future are we going to continue to want to develop crude fighter aircraft? Crude as in CREWED, not CRUDE.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got private sector companies building the next generation of drones.
Yes.
Loyal wingman drones. We've got we've got the Mahindra tying up with Anduril of the United States to build autonomous systems of the future, and you've got many Indian startups building swarm technology and things like that. I very much doubt that you will have a situation where a Tata or an L&T will be asked to build or develop a fighter aircraft. But having said that, there is already an example in front of us where even the next fighter aircraft being developed by India is likely to have a sizable private sector role even in the development space.
Hmm.
I'm talking about the AMCA.
AMCA.
In 2020, I had reported, I actually scooped that story of how the AMCA was going to be pursued as a PPP model, a public-private partnership model, which would involve three agencies: HAL, Aeronautical Development Agency, and a private sector company. At that time, it was thought that L&T would be the right fit, etc. 4 years later, nothing had actually happened because it turned out that the private sector was uh, a little reluctant to commit to that kind of a model in the absence of a clear roadmap for the AMCA in terms of work share, in terms of numbers, and uh, which actually threw up a lot of lessons. The private sector, unlike your Sarkari PSU organizations, have very different pulls and pressures. They answer to their shareholders, they answer to their board, they answer to profits, they answer to a very clear timeline as far as manufacturing and development cycles are concerned. They do not exist in a world where time and cost overruns are easily understood and forgiven. They live in a culture where time is money, unlike our organizations. They live in a world where uh, you know losing a project or failing to deliver on a project is make or break, do or die. Uh, and I'm talking about a company like L&T, which is like a Sarkari organization in terms of its size. It's enormous. It's a huge organization. Does all manner of engineering, does so many things for Indian defense, and has for years together. It's not a newbie. It's not a new kid on the block. They've been building hulls for our nuclear submarines. They build howitzer guns for the army. They do a vast amount of fabrication work for the Tejas, so they know what they're doing, and even they have a culture which is vastly different from government agencies. So I see possibly partnership models like what the AMCA will hopefully turn out to be, because God knows that the AMCA needs a certain amount of discipline that can only come
Yes.
from the private sector. A certain amount of financial time, resource allocation, and budgetary sort of discipline that can only come from the pulls and pressures of the private sector space. But beyond that, I don't think we're going to have a US kind of model where
Mm.
you see private sector companies be given full projects to develop stuff
Mm.
of this scale, I mean.
Yeah, right. Right. We'll talk now about also the Indian Air Force and perhaps the Ministry of Defense and the Government of India and their do or die movements when it comes to this particular topic. But for a quick break.
A lot of critics of Trump are raising at this point. They're saying that, look, you are willing to sideline your European allies as well as put Ukraine on the table and give the Russians what they want because you want to engineer some sort of divide between Russia and China. But the relationship between those two countries is extremely strong.
I don't think that's a strategy.
That's not the strategy,
Because realistically speaking, if they're pragmatic enough and if they have strong China hands and strong Russia hands in their coterie, which right now I think they kind of do, I don't think realistically they can drive a wedge. There is no splitting. There's only how can you use, would America want Russia or China to use a China card or a Russia card against American interests? Now, a larger picture. For Russia, what is more important in terms of interests? Looking at China and whether China served well by America, or looking at ending this war? Shashank, there are bodies coming home. People don't realize, they think that, Russia has gained, but Russia is gaining at a cost. The cost is so high that right now Putin cannot withdraw. The Chinese understand this too, and very well. They know that, the Russians or Americans are not going to do anything that is going to be that would hurt their own interests. And China also does business with everyone. They're providing to everyone,
Right. So,
including India.
So you're saying that the view in the Trump administration is not necessarily that we can split Russia from China. The view is that we can manage the level of hostility from the Russians in a way that's such that we do not have to be so engaged in the Ukraine war and focus on other priorities.
Welcome back. Shiv and I have been discussing, like Shiv said, HAL's do or die moment when it comes to Tejas deliveries, because I think that's going to sort of that's going to define how that company's relationship with the Indian Air Force remains going forward, which has been. It was bad when the Tejas was being first developed, then it kind of got to a good place, and now it's kind of again sort of on the ice because of the delays in the deliveries. But it all depends on how that company sort of reacts to this, and I think that's perhaps also why, like what you briefly said at the beginning, that maybe HAL grudgingly, even if so, has sort of accepted कि हाँ इसमें थोड़ा अगर private sector help मिल भी जाए ना तो it will be good for us only at the end of the day, because then at least we'll be able to say कि hey bro, we delivered the aircraft on time, at least not on time, sorry, but we delivered the aircraft, full stop. Right. Cool. So on this topic, a couple of more points. Since we are talking about do or die moments and making those hard decisions, the Indian Air Force. When we discussed the Tejas, and also on the previous episode when we discussed the Indian Air Force Chief's showdown with, not showdown per se, but the dressing down he gave to HAL officials at the Aero India show. We mentioned in the previous episode, and you've described this in quite detail in the Tejas episode, of how the Indian Air Force also has its own, fair share of blame to take because of its changing requirements during the Tejas cycle, etc. That is what even the Air Force chief referred to during his talk with the HAL officials. I want to know that when it comes to knowing now what you want, whether it's with your Tejas Mk1A, whether it's in terms of how many aircraft you want, how many squadrons you want to fulfill, which ones do you want to phase out? You obviously want to phase out the MiG-21, but uske baad, do you want to phase out the other remaining jets that you have, if they are that old? With AMCA, for example, what exactly is the technology that you want? Is the Air Force clear about that? Do they have that roadmap and vision clear for them? Because you can't blame governments and committees and manufacturers if they also have no idea what the customer wants? So does the Air Force have a clear picture in its head ki bhai, this is what we want for the next 4-5 decades, whether it's even including drones, for example, so that the government or the committees that we're talking about, they have some help in terms of how do we help them get what they want?
So I think you're absolutely right, Dave, when you say that the Air Force needs to take some share, a fraction of the blame over how either a lack of planning or bad planning over the decades, and I'm not talking about now, but over the decades, has resulted in a kind of compounding problem right now. We've had many different missteps, whether it is the MMRCA to decision not to build Mirage 2000s in
Yeah.
India, to even decisions before that, which to which you can trace the problems that the Indian Air Force is facing now in terms of its squadron strength depletion. But I can tell you that in the last 8, 9, 10 years, maybe a certain degree of clarity has kind of fructified. I think it was around the time when it dawned on the Air Force that the 126 MMRCA is a non-starter and it's not going to happen. That is around the time that they really had to make backup plans. And things started kicking into gear in terms of how they were going to keep air power at a certain sort of reasonably decent level. They had to extend the life of some of their aircraft. They had the MiG-29 upgrade happening. They had the Mirage 2000 upgrade that took place. They had they're still talking about the Su-30 upgrade. They had to extend service of the Mirage, the MiG-21s. All of these difficult decisions had to be taken, and all of them were expensive decisions as well. But the Air Force now has a clear plan. I think if you sort of superimpose the aircraft that are currently in service and their service life, what's left of it, along with the aircraft that are incoming. And when I say incoming, I mean the Tejas Mk1A, which is 83 plus 97, the Tejas Mk2, which is about 120 aircraft, and then the AMCA, which will come only about 11, 12 years from now. The most obvious learning or finding from that picture is that the MRFA is an inevitability. It will have to happen. Some form of MRFA will happen. There are some purists who believe, scrap the MRFA because the Tejas Mk2 is going to be flying early next year. 1 year from now, the Tejas Mk2 is going to fly. And the Tejas Mk2 is basically your medium fighter. So why do you need an MRFA at all? Which is an easier said than done, because the Tejas Mk2 will begin to fly next year, and there will be a lead time before testing is complete and deliveries actually begin, as we've seen with the first Tejas. So therefore, I think there's a degree of unanimity even with those who are sort of against the idea of another imported aircraft. And frankly, the idea of importing yet another fighter doesn't sit well with me either. But I think most reasonable people now agree that some form of an MRFA is going to be inevitable. What form that MRFA is going to take, as we've seen in our experience, is going to be fluid. Is it going to be 114 aircraft?
Yep.
Is it going to be a smaller number? Is it going to be a larger component of aircraft bought from abroad and a smaller component built here in India? Is it going to be, God forbid, a entirely off-the-shelf purchase of a smaller number like we had with the Rafale? All of those things are up in the air, but I believe that a decision to that effect will have to be made. We've done a full episode on how the MRFA is now all up in the air thanks to the F-35
Yes.
being put on the table, etc. But I think once once all the razzle dazzle of the F-35 and Trump has kind of settled, the harsh reality is that the Air Force needs numbers quickly, and those numbers are going to hopefully be made up by the Tejas. That committee is going to recommend the Tejas ASAP program, and then you've got the MRFA, which will have to provide that short-term boost of strength. I don't want to use the word stopgap anymore because it's become a joke. Nothing should be seen as a stopgap, because fighter aircraft are not party toys that you use for a while and throw away. They're going to be with you for 30, 40,
Yep.
maybe even 50 years, depending on their longevity. Look at the MiG-21s, right? So I think I don't want to crystal ball more than that, because I think the dangers of crystal balling with Indian Air Force procurement has already revealed its dangers right here on this podcast, even within one season.
Yeah, actually.
Therefore, I would say that the only clear picture that we have right now is Tejas ASAP and MRFA.
Right. That's great when it comes to having a clear picture. And knowing what the Air Force wants, the Air Force being clear, knowing what you kind of need to do with HAL to ensure it's able to ensure deliveries. But the last question and the last person in the room that's very important is the government of India,
Yeah.
because all of this comes with a lot of money. It's not cheap, right? It's one thing for the Air Force to have a clear picture. It's one thing for the Air Force to advise the government that this is what we require, this is what we need, these are the number of squadrons that we need, this is the number of fighter jets we need. Perhaps, give us these many Tejas, let's go for an MRFA, and perhaps wait for an AMCA down the road. So the do or die moment for the government of India or the Ministry of Defense, however you want to see it, do you see a risk of again just giving sort of a piecemeal solution to this larger issue, or do you think, I think we've discussed this briefly once previously as well, or do you think that this is that moment when that one hard call, it might be controversial, it might not sit down well with everybody, you might not end up pleasing everybody, but that one hard call where you have this roadmap in mind and you know that this is what you'll need to achieve it, and you can just take that long-term decision to ensure that you are never faced with the situation again, while keeping in mind that this is a piece of equipment that you might not need forever, you might need for the next maybe 2-3 decades. Like you said, with manned and manned drone wingman coming in, it's going to change the war game scenario altogether. HL also is developing its own sort of the CATS program we've talked about. So integrating all that we know right now and taking that one long-term decision, do you think that is on the anvil, or do you think we're going to perhaps end up doing sort of a piecemeal solution कि अभी के लिए ये कर लो, फिर बाकी next government आके देखेगा भाई हमसे नहीं हो
This is, again, I'm glad you asked this question, but what we are talking about right now and rolling our eyes is literally an opportunity to fix those flaws and to take a long-term view and to take hard decisions that will, perhaps avoid being in this same situation 20 years from now. The way governments, the way administrations have generally worked is people not willing to take difficult decisions because, why bother with a decision that might come back to haunt me in the form of some kind of controversy, a few years down the line. Why did you buy so many of this aircraft? Why did you cancel this project? The way our political system is structured, and you saw what happened in 2019
Yes.
with who, it blew up in his face, of course. But that's just an example of how myopia, buffoonery, and a complete lack of understanding of how defense procurement works can lead to very responsible people in high positions making all kinds of moronic allegations. But the truth of the matter is, all defense procurements are susceptible and vulnerable to politics in this country, which is why as a system, as a bureaucracy, things have been very skittish in that respect. And which is why I told you I was pleasantly surprised that the government was actually thinking of signing up for more Rafales. I thought, after the politics of 2019, the Rafale may not be a blacklisted aircraft, but it was sort of kryptonite. It was radioactive, and you couldn't touch it anymore. But they're in April they're going to be signing another deal for 27 of those aircraft with the French for the Indian Navy. But having said that, I don't think the habit of kicking the can down the road and deferring decisions is going to change very soon. But the truth is, these committees that we are kind of laughing at right now, and we mean no disrespect, obviously, because these are competent people empowered to make difficult, far-reaching decisions. They certainly have an opportunity to bell the cat and fix certain wrongs and create a template for decision making going forward. And these are brutally hard decisions.
Yep.
How do you let me list some of the things. Obviously, I'm simplifying them, but these are some of the decisions in front of not just the committee, but the political system in general. Just say no to Trump as far as combat aircraft are concerned and buy more Rafales. Or consider Trump as a geopolitical, tax that you have to pay and say that, okay, fine, we have to do this. Let's not do any more Rona Dhona. This is it. And we have to buy American combat fighters. Or we say that no, we're going to just tide this over, forget the MRFA, and we're going to put all our resources into Indian fighters. It'll have to obviously not be one or the other. There'll have to be a mix of these things. But 2 or 3 difficult, in the short term, indigestible decisions will have to be taken. Okay? There are all these pulls and pressures. Oh, the gap with China. Oh, Russia will not like this. Oh, the United States is expecting this. Oh, but what about our responsibilities in the region? All of these pulls up and pressures are going to be there. They're never going to go away. They're never going to evaporate, which is a disadvantage because it makes your decision more difficult. But it also makes it a little easier because those things are never going to change.
Yeah.
Which means you're living in a sort of constant frame of reference saying, okay, these things are not going to change. I need to take my own call right now. So will the system bite the bullet and say, this is what we're going to do? No more stopgap, no more piecemeal, no more 30, 40 aircraft, no more, आगे देखा जाएगा कि क्या करना है. That, I think, is how it's going to be. It's an opportunity. I would be the happiest person to be proven wrong that a long-term view is actually taken. In my 20 years as a defense journalist, I've been constantly disappointed by the recommendations that committees have made because they've always been how to change things in the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 months. And I hope that's going to be different this time.
Yeah. And for that, we'll have to wait probably till season 3 of Inner Defense. And I think just to kind of extend your thought, I think what also makes it more complex is that you'll also have people within the system arguing against each other. Like, for example, you just said, okay, let's take a decision to say no to Trump. Then you'll have the MEA, throwing a fit, like, hey, you cannot do that. Bro, what about us? We have to deal with him. You guys don't have to deal with him. Or if you go in for a purchase of a large number of fighter jets, then the Ministry of Finance will be like, hey, but we don't have the money. So, I mean, that's something also you have to keep in mind when you're taking the decisions. So yeah, I think we'll end it there. But as we end the season, Shiv, a couple of things I want to discuss with you on a lighter note. One, how many friends have you lost during season 2 of Inner Defense?
I'm very happy to say that I haven't lost any friends. I've had very, very vicious, fiery debates. I've had, untold numbers of messages saying, didn't expect this from you. But I have to also say that I've received an equal number of messages from people saying, glad you brought this out. You were the only person who could have, called a spade on this issue. हमारे WhatsApp group पे तबाही चल रहा है, आप, on your YouTube video and those kinds of things. I think I haven't lost any friends because the people I follow, the people I'm in touch with in the military and the veteran community are all incredibly competent people, and they know that the things I say come from not a place of malice or an intention to make some kind of personal point, but out of sheer love for the military. And with great regard for the men and women in uniform and the hope that they succeed and get the best equipment in a timely manner. I literally have no other motivations, for being a defense journalist for this long. So short answer is no. I haven't lost any friends, but yeah, people are looking at me differently now.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, but I'll say something, and I'm a witness to that. Is that you also, in every episode, have qualified what you've said, and you've explained why you believe certain things in a certain way or why you say what you're saying. It's not just making headlines, saying that one viral sentence, that one headline that will go viral. But if people actually sit down and listen to the episode or watch the episode, they'll actually get the reasoning from where you're saying what you're saying. And I think that's probably why we haven't lost any friends, because you're making sense at the end of the day.
The truth hurts.
Yeah.
That's always been something that I've believed in when it comes to reporting on sensitive matters like defense, which is that ultimately what you report is going to piss someone off. And the topics you and I have chosen, Dev, are sort of tailor-made to piss as many people off as possible. But I'm glad we did, because we didn't do it to piss people off. We did it because we're shining a light on issues that most people either are not equipped to shine a light on or are hesitant to shine a light on, because of sensitive and stuff. But I think we've evolved an extremely nice formula in this season where we've talked about sensitive matters but done it respectfully, and made people think about these things, including the people sitting in the chair. And I think that's what season 2's real achievement is.
Yeah, I quite agree with that. Right. And as we end this, one last question I want to ask of you: land, air, defense. Tell me the three pieces of current equipment that we have in service that you love or are excited the most about in service. And again, for all three domains of warfare, the three upcoming pieces of equipment that you're most excited about.
So, difficult one. So land, sea, and air. Let's see. Air, Tejas Mk1A. Very excited about it. I actually wrote a column recently where I said perhaps it's time to forget about the Tejas Mk1A and only focus on the AMCA. And I received a huge amount of fire for that. And very reasonable people have convinced me that I was wrong. And I'm happy to be wrong when I'm wrong. And I think the Tejas Mk1A is going to be a big boost to the Air Force. We're going to be able to build it in large numbers. It's going to be the Tejas that the Air Force actually wanted. And it's going to be a medium fighter that I think India will be able to even export to the world. So very excited about that. At sea, the Project 77 nuclear attack, nuclear powered attack submarines is something I'm very excited about. They're a long way off, sadly, so we're not going to see them anytime soon. But again, very excited about them as well. On land, I'm really looking forward to the mountain tank, the Zorawar tank.
Yes.
I'm also looking forward to India's private sector artillery entering the Indian Army. There's a running joke on social media about how the Kalyani and the other companies that make artillery, people say badai ho Armenia, aapka naya maal aa raha hai and stuff, and how these other countries have bought more artillery before the Indian Army has even thought of buying them. So it's become a frankly a very funny meme on the internet, and it's rooted in reality. I think it's embarrassing that the Indian Army hasn't looked at these private sector artillery pieces just yet. But above all of these, I think what I'm most excited about is India's startup ecosystem.
Yes.
And the stuff that they're going to deliver. The new space, Abhimanyu, Loyal Wingman, HAL's Cats, Warrior. That entire realm is something I'm going to be looking at very closely as we go forward.
Yeah, I quite agree with that. The startup ecosystem is, I think, something which we could not really focus on big time on season 2, but I think it really that really needs sort of focus attention and more coverage if I can say it that way. And perhaps we'll do that on season 3 of In Our Defense. So thanks, Shiv. Fantastic episode, fantastic season. In fact,
Thanks, Dave.
Great fun, lots of chat, and I think this is going to be a very memorable time for me to have this year and month or so of In Our Defense with you. Thanks as always to our viewers and listeners. We'll be back. I don't know right now when, but we'll let you know soon with from our social media and in a post very soon. We'll be back very soon in a new format, a new avatar. Till then, stay safe and not cross any boundaries with your passport. Bye bye and see you soon.